to you about the difference in rendering chrome versus steel. And I'm not going to pretend to be super great at this, but the main difference when you look at it is that one surface is highly reflective and the other surface is not. And so when you're working with a steel ball, you're essentially doing kind of rendering that you understand really well. Like, let's say our light source is coming from over here, and the far side of the steel, kind of curious about this. I guess I'm going to do this. I'm going to say that my light source is over here. And then, okay, so the far side of the steel ball is, and because it's a circular surface, we have to think in terms of the cross contour. So the far side of a steel ball is going to be darker. And of course, where the ball hits the ground, there's going to be a shadow accent, and then there's going to be shadow. And wherever you have your core shadow in here, it's going to be really dark. But then we'll be turning out So one of the questions we have to ask ourselves when we're rendering a surface is, what's the local value? And I think it's safe to say that in steel, the local value is not that, it's not that light. It's kind of a middle value. So we figure out the local value. Then we ask ourselves, well, what's the level of reflectivity? So it doesn't have no reflectivity, but it really doesn't have very high reflectivity, right? So, like if you're comparing it to the chrome ball sitting in front of us, it has a really high level of reflectivity. And then if we compared it to a water droplet, it has low reflectivity, and it has like no translucence. So the translucence makes it so that you get a kind of reverse effect with the lighting. But this just has a really normal. And the only way that I've ever found to get my transitions to be smooth is to just keep on working on them. It's kind of just a slow and somewhat laborious process. But what you get out of it is you get things that are compellingly realistic. So the silhouette is a really hard silhouette. It's not like a silhouette that has, it's not like hair or anything like that where there would be hard and so many soft edges. The highlight on it is almost non-existent. However, there is a real sense of form. So you go back in with your eraser and try to make really beautiful, smooth transitions. And I am very tempted again on this to see what kind of effect the smoothing hand would have. And it might be that you take, and if you're drawing this kind of material, it might be that you went ahead and just smoothed it. So my tendency on this would be to work back and forth. So I would get this solved like that, and then I would go back, like if I had, say I was working with a pencil, and I had just done what I just did with the smoothing tool, and now I would go back and I would look for I would look for if I could get it better. And look to move away from this, the effect that I've achieved here, which is like a kind of haze. I don't want that hazy effect. I just wanted smooth transitions. And so I'm working back and forth. This time I'm going to be a little more selective about my hard and soft edges. I think I'll leave a few soft edges, maybe especially up in the light. That seems kind of convincing. Okay, I think I'm contented there. And now I'm going to move on to a chrome ball. So it's essentially the exact same kind of volume. So if we're just relating to it as a volume, we would start out in the exact same place. We would be rendering away from the light, like our dark side would be coming up in here, and our light side would be coming here. But I guess the main difference that we have to kind of acknowledge is a reflectivity. So while I am aware of the fact that the light is coming from the upper left, and so I'm just going to try to quickly render a surface that shows us the light coming from the upper left. Very similar to the effect that we found on the steel ball. However, and this might be really fun, especially if you were working with charcoal. Okay, so now what we would be asking ourselves is what's happening in the environment. So we can read into this chrome ball all kinds of things happening in the environment. So for instance, one of the things happening in the environment in the chrome ball is that there is a light source coming from the top left, and it's being reflected tremendously. So we could take, and if we wanted to say, yeah, let's just say that there's this huge light, and the light bends itself around the surface. It's not, the light is not shaped like that. However, when it comes in contact with the surface, that's what the surface does to it. It just misshapes it, And then the next thing that's happening, and the thing that we're looking at, is that it's sitting on a tabletop. And so the tabletop itself is also going to be wrapping itself around in this thing. And so it's this mirror. But why is it darkening right at the edge? And the reason that it's darkening at the edge is because this object is casting a shadow. And the reflection is a reflection of that shadow that's being cast. So here's our tabletop with all the shading that a tabletop would have happening right there. And as it gets further into the distance, the lines get softer. And then there's clearly a doorway into this room happening over there. And so it becomes a really fun way to kind of tell a story about something happening in the room. There's some other detail in the room like there. And then we'd need to go about really cleaning it up. And because the silhouette. So if we ask ourselves the basic questions, what's the volume? What's the local color? So the local color is, not that dark. The local color is kind of middle light value. And then we go further and say, what's the translucency? The translucency is almost none, is 0, like absolute 0, actually, now that I think about it for half a second. And then but then the reflectivity, and the reflectivity is super high. And they make it look a lot better by having a really dark ceiling there, but anyway. And then down here it would have this, it's sitting in it, there would be a shadow accent right there, and that shadow accent would be stretching into a cast shadow that would be coming over here, and then that cast shadow is of course reflected in this chrome ball. And that's why we have this. So the furthest out edge on it, instead of being full of reflected light, is a reflection of the tabletop that it's sitting on. And just for the sake of a cool drawing, how about if we throw in a water droplet? So the water droplet has a little reflected light on it, a little cast shadow underneath it. And the far side of the water droplet has a core shadow too. And this part is light. And the light's passing through up here. But the surface is super reflective. So that's a translucent surface. So we have a reflective, translucent, and matte surfaces.